Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Back to the TARDIS podcast, the podcast where we take a look at every single episode of the 2005 revival of BBC's Doctor Who. I'm Jeff.
I don't know who we are today, bro.
I'm Jonathan, or Jake.
And this week we're discussing Series 7, Episode 5, The Angels Take Manhattan. This is Amy and Rory's farewell episode, and boy howdy, if this isn't just a perfect encapsulation of how this era frustrates me, because there's a lot of things that I think are really good, and a lot of about this episode, and a lot of things that at the same time really annoy me.
Yeah, I agree. I was watching it and I was like, wow, there's actually like a lot of really good performances and emotional core to this, if only it were in a different context.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another Return of the Angels, and I think the last full episode that we've had focusing on them until Series 13. Well, actually, no, that's not... Well, actually, no, because that's not going to be... I don't know if that's going to be a full episode focusing on them. I don't know how that's going to work. Regardless. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it could be another Time of the Doctor situation where it's just like, oh, here's a scene, and then it's done. But yeah. Go on.
I mean, I'm not going to complain if they're not actually really bringing the Angels back for a full story, because while I think the problem with the Angels in this story is the same problem that I had with the Angels in Flesh and Stone, where to make the plot work, they make them needlessly complicated.
Yeah. Basically.
It's honestly just down to the shit like the angel babies and like the Statue of Liberty being an angel or whatever, because just the initial concept of a hotel where they've basically made batteries out of these people, that's not a bad... I can work with that. That makes sense, honestly. I can see that happening. That's not a problem to me, really. That works. But everything else, like the fucking like baby cherub angels, it's just like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, I don't know if I've said it in such an exact way before, but angels as an idea of like, basically if you made entropy a predator... Yeah. And added, like, a time travel spin to it, like, that's cool. I like the shit they do with that in this episode. It's just, like, as you said at the beginning, Jeff, it's just an encapsulation of just, like, there's so much promise, you have a good baseline, you have a good setup, there's some good build-up, the acting is good, the chemistry is good, you know, the set design, the filming, etc., and then you get to the climax.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's what really kills it. We'll get there though. I wanna before that I wanna kind of
let's bask in the positivity for a bit.
Let's
change.
Back it up. Let's back it up. I mean I'm not gonna be entirely positive. Like I think there's some level, like I don't know, the cold open's all right. The noir stuff, it's okay, all right. They play fucking An Englishman in New York by staying after the opening credits, which is like that's a little on the nose, but okay. All right. Rory and Amy and the Doctor are in Manhattan. He's reading a book. There's a setup where he tears the last page out of the book and is like, I don't like endings. And they start reading the book, only to find out that they're in the book, and it explains that Rory has been sent back to the 30s by an angel. And they're trying to get back together. Not a bad setup, honestly. It works.
I think the device with the with the book really works. It's really well utilized throughout the story, really.
My problem with the book and how this episode treats time travel in general is that it kneecaps itself because of the show's own complete wishy-washiness on what the laws of time entail. Like, sometimes it's like, yeah, we can change it or we can go back or whatever. And sometimes it's like, no, there are very set rules in stone that you cannot break. And it's like, why?
Yeah, Doctor Who is very wishy-washy with time travel in general, and, you know, where are the Reapers in this paradox thing? Like, who fucking know? Yeah. Like, the Reapers are dead. Don't think about them. We've left them in series 1, and they're not coming back.
We read it in the book, so now it's going to happen, and we already know that. No, that's not no. You do that shit all the time.
Yeah, I admire the creativity, and I've noticed another thing with Moffat's storytellings is that obviously my favorite part of the Matt Smith era is Series 5, and that's going for a very like fairy tale kind of science fantasy as opposed to hard sci-fi angle. And I'm thinking like when you give him a genre and it's just like, okay, just do this like sort of like heightened like pseudo noir thing, like he can hit the tone of that, and when it's just that, like him trying to hit that, I think the stories resonate more than when he's tried to go for like just generic like sci-fi avant-garde storytelling, if you know what I mean. Because when it was just like, here's a time travel plot with River Song and the companions, it's just like, well, this is going all over the fucking place. But when it's like, here's a fairy tale story, here's a noir story, it's like, okay, I can see where you're going, and I think it's more coherent.
Yeah. So River explains to Rory the whole conceit, one of the major conceits of the episode, which is that it's impossible to land the TARDIS in this time period because of all the temporal energy, and the TARDIS doesn't like it and whatever. Okay, fine. The whole problem with this episode is that it presents that as the be-all end-all reason, and it's like, you have a time and space travel machine. Park it in New Jersey 3 hours earlier than you need to be arrived, and take a fucking taxi. And this keeps happening throughout the episode, and it's like, this is not as hard as you're making it seem.
Yeah.
Like it kills the episode for me because, like, you know, there's like, haha, you know, like plot holes aren't the be-all end-all of things. But, like, and, like, you know, there are plenty of things that I like that have silly potholes that I'm willing to look over. But usually they're not shit this glaring. Like, it's going too hard on this being, like, an unsolvable thing when it's, like... And it's kind of like... It's part of the problem in general of, like... When you have a time and space machine that can go anywhere, you do kind of occasionally need to put in a reason of why don't they just use it to go to X. But in this case, the reason that they came up with is really silly because it doesn't account for, like, the fact that there are other methods of transportation.
Yeah, we'll get to the end when we get there, but I think it's just very symptomatic of, again, kind of Moffat's penchant for fairy tale storytelling, even when the companions are like even Bill and Clara, like when their fate meets a grisly end, it's sort of bittersweet in the way that he's like, well, okay, this is bad, but also it's Doctor Who, so something wonderful can come out of that, and that's, like, neat and all as a philosophy. But a lot of the time it just, like, takes the teeth out of any, like, takes the impact of whatever like story beat you're trying to get. And we'll talk specifically about what happens to Amy and Rory at the very end, because I think there's a lot of like branching, interesting stuff you could have done with the resolution.
Yeah.
And this is pretty much I don't want to say it's the expected thing, because obviously it was meant to be a twist that like, oh, they almost got out of it, but this time they won't. But at the same time, it's like, it's the safest option if you're trying to write a companion exit story.
Well, we'll get to it, but this episode smacks of 45-minute syndrome. Like, this episode is a whole-ass normal Doctor Who plot until the last 5 minutes where they slam the brakes and go, oh shit, right, they're supposed to leave, and pull out a fucking Diabolus Ex Machina that feels super lazy and like it was an afterthought.
Yeah, it really doesn't make much sense. Like, why didn't they just keep the original? Like, why go through the trouble of fixing the first thing and then just sort of hand-waving one last angel into existence to finish the job, instead of just keeping with the concept that they can't change
and
the
that
time
even then it falls into the same, like, oh, I can't come get you again. Take a fucking taxi. It's not that hard. So annoying.
Oops.
They do the period stuff well.
Yeah, the period stuff's fine. I don't get what the hell is that mob boss's deal, though. Like, he's like, he like locks, like he flicks the lights to like, he's like, all right, now you're gonna tell me everything about the angels, and it's like I'm pretty sure she would have told you anyways. Like, it just like, this is part of the problem, is you have your really good character scenes, but it once again feels like he's thought up bits of a story and is going to, by whatever means necessary, force the plot to fit those beats, even if it feels super silly and contrived.
That angel bussy got him acting unwise.
Borat voice, my wife.
Oh yeah, there's some major wife guy shit in here. Like, for real. No. Yeah.
Also,
yeah,
like,
no.
okay.
Like, he says time can be rewritten. Not once you've read it, once we know what's coming, it's written in stone. And that makes no sense, because there's so many times that the Doctor, like, changes or affects the future in some way. And it's like, there's no way that you wouldn't have read about this thing and then changed it. That makes no sense.
I think
Like,
the point is supposed to be, like, if it's your personal history, you can't change it. But, like, that distinction makes very little sense.
And it doesn't even follow its own logic, because, like, he cheats that shit all the time. He was supposed to die last season, for fuck's sake. Like, he was supposed to die last season. He's supposed to die at Trenzalore this season. It just doesn't work.
Yeah,
Like,
you could have the...
It's being weirdly picky.
Yeah, there's always a loophole in this, and yet for some reason here there isn't, I guess. I don't know. And another plot hole I just thought of is, so the paradox basically kills all the angels, right? Except for, like, the lone one, bullshit.
The one that's there because it's like, oh shit, we need an ending to the episode.
Okay, but if that's true, then I get this happened before the paradox, but it's like, then how are there angels around in New York to send them back in the first place?
That's the point. That's the point, is that none of that ever happened, which is why they're back in the graveyard.
Yeah, so I don't know. This episode makes my head hurt, and I'm not saying, like, all of that is bad writing, but it's just like when some of it is hand-waved away and some of it isn't. Again, it's confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's like, oh God, what was I gonna say? There was something, and I completely forgot. Hold on a second, it'll come back eventually. We'll get there. Just give me a second. Hold on, I gotta take a look at this transcript here. Oh God, I'm completely drawing a blank. I'm fucking discombobulated right now, my dudes.
Discombobulate.
Uh,
Do we want to talk about River?
River's good in this episode. It's the first time I feel like her relationship with Eleven has worked, even though she literally calls out the fact that Matt Smith looks and is way younger than her, but like, just because they comment on it doesn't make it any less like
Nancy.
Yeah, a little. Well, I mean, he's an adult.
Yeah.
He's still an adult, but it's like...
It's just not a dynamic that clicks as well as we know it's going to.
Yeah. Well, I think it does click kind of well here, even if the setup for it is kind of contrived, because it's like, we know that the angels are just literally stone. So unless it's like the hardest stone known to man, you're telling me that there isn't something in the TARDIS that you can grab that can cut through stone? Anywhere?
Yeah.
Like, why does she have to break her hand to get out of that? Are you telling me that the sonic screwdriver doesn't have a setting to resonate concrete to disintegrate?
We need that 11th Doctor River song, Angst. Imagine me clapping along with that.
But no, like, the scene where they argue is good. I really like that scene. It's just a shame that it's so contrived to get there and then where they go from it.
Yeah. Also, so weird that 11 just can't go, hey babe, I can use as much regeneration energy as I want. I'm the timeless fucking child. And then...
Thank you, Chris Chibnall. Very cool. Yeah.
No, she's good, and the only nitpick I have is that I think I would legitimately like her presence in this episode if she was like a regular like companion in the show, as opposed to like, hey, let's get Alex Kingston like every 5 to 6 episodes.
Yeah. And it's like, because I'm gonna jump ahead a bit because it made me think about the part where he asks her to travel with him and she's like, yeah, no. And it's like, I understand that at this point, yes. However, she should have been a companion before this. At this point in her arc, I understand him asking and her going no. However, it's kind of borked by the fact that we haven't seen, like, her whole arc is predicated on the fact that she was a future companion, and that never happened. It never happened.
Yeah,
like,
and what we do know of it is like off screen.
Yeah. Well, even then, it's not off screen. It's off screen and it's not full time. Like, when you fucking look at Silence in the Library, it is very clearly set up like she is supposed to be a future companion. And she's not. She just isn't. And it kind of lets the whole conceit of her character down for me.
Yeah, and I don't know.
And it's disappointing because I don't hate River. I think she's got a lot of good scenes, but I think consistently up until her final episode, and even then it was kind of too late, her potential was not fully realized ever, or even close to realized.
It's a testament to Alex Kingston's acting that I can still believe at least that she loves the Doctor, whether that be 10, 11, or 12, but the story writing lets her down so often that in the end I sort of believe the Rose Doctor romance more.
Yeah, no, like, I was about to say this. I was formulating this thought in my brain right now. Not until Peter Capaldi, not until 12, did it ever really feel like that the Doctor loved River back. I do not get that feeling at all from at least how 11, how he acts it.
It was...
You don't see
You're
it.
right.
It does not
11,
feel like he loves her.
It's like, it's almost a joke on 11's part.
It very much, you can feel it from Peter Capaldi. Much more. And that's saying something, because his Doctor is, like, fairly arrow ace. And, like, much more prickly and closed off, but you feel much more affection from him than you ever did from 11.
11, to his credit, I kind of believe it here. The problem is that 11, how he acts and how he's written to be, like, horny / attracted to people, it's almost like a joke. Like, 11's, like all the quips in Series 6 about, like, oh, I love a bad girl, and she's like, she kills people with her gun, I shouldn't like it, but I do. It's like, there's no substantive difference in 90% of 11's interactions with River than when 11 is weirdly horny with Clara. There's no difference, aside from the fact that he knows he's supposed to be with her in this certain way.
Yeah.
Again, aside from this episode, credit to that. But it's like, again, too little, too late.
And, like, there's a little bit in Name of the Doctor, but that is completely too little, too late. And I think she's really good in that episode, and I don't like that episode. I think she's the one. Alex Kingston is the one good part in that episode, which is saying something, because I think that character is consistently misused, and I don't think that episode's very good. So
yeah, are we sort of getting to the? This is more of a question for Geoff. Are we kind of getting to the tail end of Moffat being fucked over by having to do this and Sherlock, or is that, like, more like
a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at the timing, I think. Let me take a look here at when Sherlock seasons when Sherlock seasons aired, because Series 1 of Sherlock was 2010. Series 2 was 2012. Series 3 was 2014. And then it took a break until 2016 because obviously, like, Martin Freeman and Benedict Cumberbatch became very in demand. But, like, I think, because, like, so, like, 2012, 2013, Doctor Who Series 6 and 7, and the 50th celebrations, Sherlock, Tintin, though I think he'd already done the work on that, but still, it was a very busy period of time for him. And 2016, 2017 was the tail end of his involvement with Who. So a good chunk of Peter Capaldi's tenure would have been during Sherlock's break period.
Yeah, because I can sort of sense there's a little bit of an uptick in quality, because, as I said, like, while we've been focusing largely on the negatives, there's a lot of positives in this story. It's just sort of like more.
I think Moffat considers
stuff.
Series 7 as the point where he was really badly overworked and very stressed, because initially, like, contractually at least, the only person who contractually was obligated to appear and was a 100% for the 50th special was Clara, because Matt Smith's contract ended at the end of Series 7. So he didn't know if he was going to be able to get Matt back. He didn't know if he was going to get David. He, like, obviously Christopher Eccleston had turned it down at a certain point, but for a while, like, he had to write a version of the 50th where Clara was the lead.
That would have been interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I kind of, at least from memory, I remember Series 7B sort of being a recovery period.
Yeah, it's fine. It's better than this, I think. It kind of blends together in my brain, but it's much... I don't remember it pissing me off as much as some of this stuff. I think The Snowman's pretty good. I think Bells of St. John is pretty neat. Rings of Akaten is all right. Cold War is pretty good. God, what else even is there? Crimson Horror is underrated. I think that's Mark Gatiss' best episode.
Yeah, but I guess my whole point in bringing that whole discussion topic up is that I feel like Moffat has more focus here, and it's more... I mean, maybe it's because he's not trying to do this whole Galaxy Brain story arc anymore. He's just trying to wrap up these characters that, granted, he did fumble really hard in the middle with, but it works much better for me. River does, the companions do, again, until the resolution.
Yeah.
It's a weird beast of an episode, and again, Series 7A is very emblematic of, like, the triumphs and shortcomings of the Smith-Moffat era.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it's honestly, like, I kind of felt it before, I just hadn't vocalized it, but realizing it now, that comment on it didn't ever really felt like 11 really loved River, like, that really, I think that is part of what really lets down that arc. Like, I discussed my problems with Series 6's arc and how she should have been a companion. But at the bare minimum, like, even if we had what we still had, it would have been at least a decent chunk better if I actually believed that this relationship wasn't one-sided. And, like, they kind of pay lip service to the fact that it's occasionally one-sided. But there's supposed to be the thing of, like, you know, when she describes, like, loving the Doctor as, like, loving a mountain range or whatever, where it's like he's this impossibly old being or whatever. Yeah, but it still feels like there should be more affection coming from him than there is.
He kind of just is, like, at the beginning... he's kind of just very confused by her, and he ends up being, like, very put off by her. And it feels like that never really went away. Like, he still just doesn't really know what to do with her.
For fuck's sake, I believe 10. 10 feels more like he loved River's song than fucking 11 did. And 10 only met her for the first time, like, a few weeks before he died.
I think the problem is that I could understand the story arc of, like, he doesn't know her, then he's sort of, like, in love with the idea or the enigma of her, which I think is, like, sort of where the beginning of Series 6 is going, / the beginning of Series 5, but then it's, like, there's never a point where I felt like he actually started to care, other than the fact that, like, oh, she's Amy and Rory's daughter, so now he has, like, an extra reason to care by, like, knowing that.
Yeah. It doesn't really feel like he cares back until her last episode, which I think might be part of the reason why that episode works so well, other than the fact that, like, Peter Capaldi is amazing and Alex Kingston is amazing. But also, it's the first time, because Peter Capaldi is so amazing and his Doctor is so nuanced and well portrayed, it's the first time where it actually feels like a real relationship.
It's also interesting that we're kind of talking about how the best 11 River interaction are when we actually see them fight and not just be like stupid puppy dog, like, funny horny at each other.
Yeah.
And it would be an interesting juxtaposition if, like, 11 and River's dynamic was more combative, despite 12 arguably being more combative overall. Like that's just like a dynamic contrast that would be interesting to me. It's just a shame. Again, Smith Moffat era, take a drink, a lot of potential, didn't go the places it could with it.
Yeah. So yeah, they have the fight, and there's the thing of Rory being trapped, and how they do it, how they decide to get out of it. This scene, I will not lie, as critical as I've been of this episode, aside from specific parts, and as critical as I've been about this era, Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill are obviously still fantastic, and this scene with them on the rooftop is probably, I don't know if it's my favorite, because I don't think about scenes from this era very much, but in terms of like rankings, but it's one of my favorite scenes from this era. It's really good.
It's very good, yeah. And I think that's...
even if it's a little funny that like Rory even acknowledges, like, yeah, since when has my death fucking stuck?
Yeah, the episode was like pretty okay. Like, obviously it went back and forth and had a lot of demerits, but I think this was the scene that really made me be like, okay, like, I get what this episode is trying to do. And, like, if it were in a different overall context, I might appreciate it a lot more, because there is a really solid, like, emotional core here, and the actors are really doing a good job with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when
Absolutely.
it's a consistent thing in this era that when a script just gives Amy and Rory time to be themselves and to explore their romance and how they care about each other, it's almost always gold. So that's good. I've heard criticisms from actually IRL friends that like they stopped watching Doctor Who around this time because they felt like it was just the Amy and Rory show, and discounting the fact that like the companions basically are also a defining part of any era, just as the Doctor is.
Basically, the difference is that before now, you usually pretty much had one companion with the Doctor, so it explored their relationship. Whereas here, there's an additional person in that formula, and the series, it does explore Amy and the Doctor's relationship, and then it also explores Amy and Rory's relationship. I have complaints about this era. The focus on Amy and Rory is not one of them.
For sure. I think, as a thesis statement, if you were to say as a showrunner, it's like, I want this era to focus on, like, this dynamic and how these two love each other, and this dynamic and how these two love each other, the other two being the Doctor and River, I'd go, okay, that's interesting to me. It's just a shame the other half of that kind of falls short most of the time. The other half
of that isn't truly good until one episode that's also the last episode, and also technically doesn't count because 12 is a completely different character.
Yeah, so it's, again... But all complaining aside, like, full props to Arthur Darvill and Karen Gillan for the scene where they're, like, jumping off. Basically, again, it's the fairy tale thing of, like, our love can be a miracle and survive, like, the most deadly of odds. It's basically the same way that Rory, quote-unquote, cheats death by coming back from being erased from time. It's a stupid miracle, but we accept it as the audience because it's emotionally resonant and, like, it's a happy ending.
Whatever. Stephen Moffat does way worse shit than the ending to fucking Big Bang.
Yeah, so, like, again, emotionally...
I would have called that shit out if there was only one season of that, but it just got stupider from there, so, whatever.
Yeah, so, like, I can accept the emotional resolution, or at least the resolution before the stupid resolution actually happens. That's not a complaint of mine at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that leads us to, as I mentioned, the episode neatly wraps itself up with a bow, and then Stephen Moffat sits up from his all-nighter and goes, oh fuck, they're supposed to leave this episode, and hastily slams something out. And it's just it's so, like, I like Amy and Rory, but aside from Donna, which I think is bad in a different way, that's bad in a, like, this is just cruel way. This, I think, might be my least favorite and the worst companion departure that I've ever seen. The only thing that comes close to it is, like, Donna, or I guess, like, Ryan and Graham, where they're just like, yeah, all right, bye, because there was no character enough for it to really have any sort of emotional payoff. Like, and even then, I think that this is worse because at least Ryan and Graham leaving, it's not at a big moment, but I think it's fair to say that not every companion departure needs to be a big thing, and sometimes people just move on. Whatever. Yes, it botches the emotional resonance because I didn't really care about those characters except maybe Graham, and even then he wasn't utilized as well in Series 12. But this is just actively bad. Like, sometimes Deus Ex Machinas can be good. I guess sometimes Diabolus Ex Machinas can be good. This is just stupid and contrived.
It's also the type of thing that, I don't know, because Amy and Rory are the equivalent to what Clara is for 12, and the fact that he just sort of accepts that it's like, I can't see you again, which we already went over. There's, like, a million ways that that's, like, not actually true. And it feels like, again, like, he's trying to have the cake and eat it, too, with, like, this is technically a happy resolution. They get to live the rest of their lives together in peace, just, you know, away from the Doctor, and they can't ever travel with him again.
I'm gonna put this right now, because I know we have history. I have known, this has been going on for years, that I am all right with Hellbent and you don't like it. But I genuinely think the way that he does the sad but not so sad ending with Clara is better than how he does it here.
Oh, for sure. Even as someone who doesn't like Hellbent and what it does, I can understand emotionally, like, why the character would go to the steps that he does, and at least in the sense of Clara, their character dynamic, that arc has been consistent, and there hasn't been any real big fumbles, and there hasn't been any, like, oh, you're leaving the TARDIS, just kidding. Arguably there is, but it's done better even there. So it's like,
it's done there as in, like, an actual ups and downs of a relationship, not like we had a conclusive ending, but oh shit, they're still contracted to be on. Partially because Jenna Coleman wasn't actually contracted to stay on, and she just decided to stay on a season and some extra episodes.
Exactly. So I couldn't figure out, because again, this story, you could argue, is supposed to be subversive, and it's supposed to be another story where they barely get it out, except they don't. On paper, I'm fine with that. Except, we've already had an episode where they almost didn't get out and then leave. And that's the one with the hotel that I always forget the name of. But yes, the God Complex. And that's a good episode.
And also, if you want to do that, you can set that up better than you did. I refuse to believe that that is all that Stephen Moffat could come up with. It may have been all that he could come up with due to time or budget or whatever, but I know he can do better than that.
Yeah.
Like, so a good example right away would be, like, to a lesser extent, Bill, even though that's kind of divisive. I like how Bill leaves, but, you know. But, you know, go all the way back to Sounds in the Library, the River Song thing. The computer thing and the data ghosts, those are both set up. And when the two get combined to be a sort of happy, if bittersweet ending for River and her crew, it works, and it has emotional resonance. Here, it just feels like a shitty, like, it feels like he was trying to come up with something of, like, oh, you forgot this all along. But it doesn't work because the ending that he came up with should have conclusively killed off all antagonistic parties in the episode. So it just had to be like, oops, it didn't.
I think I know how you could make this ending essentially the same, but have it be much more emotionally resonant and not have it involve plot bullshit. If you make it so that basically continue the theme on from the God complex, except Amy and Rory didn't really want to leave, then it was more Eleven's guilt kind of caught up to him, and he said, like, no, this is too dangerous. And maybe if you wanted to tie it back to that, have this be the story where they finally believe. It's just like, you know, our love can only... It sounds stupid, but we can only do this, like, cheating bullshit so many times. I guess you have to rewrite...
to save you from a bullet to the head.
Yeah, you know, basically rewrite it to the fact of, like... I don't know. Because the only way in my mind that this works is that they get their happily ever after, like Amy and Rory finally choose to just be with each other and just be on Earth. And if we want to still have the Doctor angst, have whatever happens in the story basically make it so that they hate him and they never want to see him again. Just leave him emotionally crippled.
Or at least put in a point where they're very conclusively like, no, we are not going to do... Because, again, like, part of the thing for this, too, that I forgot to mention is it is stated that Karen Gillan wanted her character to have a final ending. And that's, I think, part of why Moffat did this the way that he did. But I think... saying a final ending like that and assuming that it has to be either death or they physically can't get back to the Doctor is, I think that that's a very narrow-minded viewpoint of things. Because I do think that Martha had a very final ending. Yes, RTD chose to bring her back. But the ending where she basically, to his face, goes, you treated me like shit and put me and my family through a year of hell just because we were close to you. I'm not going to do this with you anymore, and I'm going to leave. That can be conclusive. That can absolutely be conclusive and final.
For sure. And it's
now,
also
admittedly, like, I do think that it would have to be them saying we're done with you and not the other way around, because Eleven as a character would never be done for real with someone unless they specifically told him no, or if he couldn't reach them. However, I think it's and you know, we were saying this last season, that it is very easy to craft an alternate arc out of shit like The Girl Who Waited and the God Complex, where they lose their faith in him and they basically say, like, yeah, no, like, we are done with you. We're not going to do any more adventures. We're not going to return. Like, I understand that she wanted the character to not return to sort of keep the emotional impact of her leaving. And, you know, okay, fine, they don't have to return, even if, like, for just, like, a small cameo or whatever. Even though I think that would be kind of neat, and a dynamic that we haven't seen before is just, like, a group that he just pops in on every now and then just to visit, not to do any big adventures, just to visit. But, you know, whatever. You could have, very easily, a good, emotionally resonant, conclusive final ending that doesn't end with them dying or coming up with an excuse why they physically can't get back to him.
Yeah, it takes all the teeth out of it if it's not by their choice. And I guess you could say there's some impact in Amy choosing to go back to the past to be with Rory, but again, we've already seen her make this choice in Amy's choice.
This is a rehab. We've seen her make this choice in Amy's choice. We technically, in some ways, saw her make it in Girl Who Waited. It has been done at this point and done to death.
Hell, you could even make it a full circle thing, because we've had Amy's choice, where Amy chooses Rory. And then we have The Girl Who Waited, where, yeah, that's a fucked moral conundrum, but, like, Rory chooses quote-unquote his Amy from his time, and to have that basically come full circle with them saying, we're choosing each other, and that means we can't be around you. Maybe we don't hate you. Maybe we do now, and maybe not in the future, but all we know is you're staying away. You know, we already lost a daughter because of you. She loves you. That's her right. We don't care, but we are done. And that can still emotionally devastate him. That can still get him to the place where we see him in The Snowman.
Yeah. No, it's very much a thing of, like, and I think it ties into, like, in some extent, like, it's not like that this was the cause or whatever, but I think it kind of ties into, like, a Marvel movie zombie franchise thing of things can't ever end unless, like, it's final. Like, I don't know what reasoning it was, but for whatever reasoning, they decided that it could not be a final ending unless the pawns were either dead, which Moffat was never going to do. Never, ever, ever. The only companions to actually have, like, died and made it stick is, like, Adric. And even then, actually, I think Big Finish made that not stick. But whatever. Adric and, like, I think a couple of, like, 60s companions. And no other companions have, like, for real died as they're leaving. Like, yeah. It's disappointing because I think what you said, I think it would be very emotionally resonant and very good and very mature storytelling for that to happen. And it's so disappointing that I guess they felt like they had to do it this way, because you can just see, you could easily construct something so much better that I think would be a highlight of the show, up there with, like, RTD era. But it doesn't happen.
Word.
And I'm glad that we don't have to keep talking about this anymore, because we're finally done with Amy and Rory. Because seriously, this is a dead horse that we have been beating for. Let me go to Anchor right now and check how many episodes we have been beating this dead horse for. I think it would have been since, like, Girl Who Waited, right? That would have been when we first came up with this alternate idea. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is the 13th. We have been beating this dead horse for an entire season's worth of episodes.
Woo! Consistency.
And I'm like, it still bums me out, but I'm very glad to not be talking about it anymore, because at this point, I feel like this conclusively puts the nail in the coffin, and I've said pretty much all that I can say about this.
Same here.
Yeah. So, ratings, I guess. Yeah. I think, as I said, this episode, like, it doesn't frustrate me as much as some other episodes, but there definitely is the sense of, like, this frustrating me because I can genuinely see, like, the moments of greatness that are here, but their full potential is not realized. I can feel them here. I think Amy and Rory in this episode, their final scene, the way that River and Eleven interact in this episode, their arc as a whole, and River's arc as a whole. There's good stuff here, but it's kind of buried, and the problem is that the overall plot surrounding it is full of holes and issues, and continuing the Weeping Angels just not being as satisfying as that initial 45 minutes back in 2007, and just slamming plot contrivances in to, like, basically force this thing when it makes absolutely no sense that this is the only option that they have. And because of that, I feel like it gets a C as a passing grade, right? It gets a passing grade, but only barely. I don't know. I was homeschooled through like
you
first
were
grade.
you were correct.
Through K-12. I don't remember what a passing grade is.
C for effort. Yeah, this episode is so strange because it's like if we're just going by the acting, the mood, the tone, the setting, it's like A for me. At least, like, especially in the past, and how the sound effects and the sound design of the angels, how they move, except for the dumb ass gag with the Statue of Liberty. But, like, discounting that, like, it's pretty much all hitting for me. It's just the actual, like, plot and narrative we're going through, the plot holes, the fact that this is basically too little too late on everything, except that Amy and Rory's dynamic are where it absolutely should be at this point in their relationship. Like, all of that is, like, in, like, the D category for me.
Yeah.
So I think I absolutely agree 100% with Geoff that, like, just all of this together, it's a C, and it's a very enjoyable C for like 80%, 90% of the runtime, right up until the climax, right up until Amy and Rory make their decision and jump from that building. After that, it's just a nosedive, and it's all the reminders of this era that we've been beating a dead horse with since The Girl Who Waited at the earliest, and probably the beginning of Series 6, if we're really, counting everything.
Yeah, really, it's Series 6 as a whole. We've been beating it for a season and a half. Really.
Yeah, so, I guess, requiescat in pace, Amy and Rory. And, this episode is a C, and that's unfortunate because the departure of arguably one of my favorite companions personally, nostalgically, deserves better than a C, but that's what they got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a weird episode, because usually when it's a bad episode, it's like you don't really enjoy it, but this is an episode that just has so many really strong moments, but is nonetheless in context just a fucking mess. Yeah, I don't really know. It's hard to really nail it down, but I would say maybe like a 6 out of 10. It's just a very inconsistent episode.
Yeah. All right. Next week, we were supposed to do a bonus episode this week, but I couldn't figure it out, and other things meant that I didn't have anything prepped, so we just did this instead. I'm still not sure what we're going to do for that bonus episode, but I'll figure something out, and that's what we will do next time. Until then, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at B2TARDISPod. You can support us on Patreon for a number of benefits, such as early access to episodes, the ability to listen in live to episodes being recorded, and potentially even the ability to guest star upon an episode of your choosing. I'm Geoff. You can follow me on Twitter at WheatleyDL.
I'm Matt Smith's infinite regenerational energy. Fuck you. You can follow me at skyhigh9_5 for all your mediocre shit posting needs.
I'm Jonathan, and I'm invisible. Bye.
And we will see you all next week.